Oh, turn mine up again. Very good to go.
Good morning. I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Jefferson County PUD Board of Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. It is 10:03 a.m. Our first order of business is determining that we have a quorum of the Board of Commissioners. I am Kenneth Collins, Commissioner, District 2, and Chair of the Board.
Jeff Randall, Commissioner, District 1.
Dan Tupper, Commissioner for District 3.
Jefferson PUD is offering both virtual online meetings as well as in-person meetings unless advance notice is provided. In-person attendance will be limited to provide sufficient space and masking is encouraged. Online participant audio will be muted upon entry. Please unmute at the appropriate time to speak. If you're calling in, use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to indicate your desire to speak. Item 2 on our agenda is approval of the agenda itself. Are there any revisions to the agenda?
I just wanted to ask for a clarification for Kevin and give him a heads up that under manager's report, I would request that we get an update on the Olicat building and our wholesale service contract for that building, and if service has actually been established or just what the status is since our last meeting.
I'll add it to manager's report. So I'll make the motion to accept the agenda as amended.
And I'll second the motion.
The motion to approve the agenda has been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of the motion to approve our agenda for this morning's meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. The agenda has been approved. Item 3 on the agenda this morning is a review of the broadband business model. And Mr. O'Donnell, I believe this is yours.
Yep, I'll be taking it with Doug Dawson, our business planning consultant, on all things broadband. What I'll do is, Doug, I'm going to start with a brief overview of where we are with our grants, and then we'll get into the business model just after that. That's okay with you?
You bet.
Yep. I'm going to share my screen in a second. Oh, no. Escape. Back to Zoom. Okay. So for today, we're going to go over let's see here. Our grant project summary. We're going to talk about the business model projections, the loan payback schedule. I was hoping to discuss some rate and policy changes, but I think we're going to put that off to a different meeting. We're going to delay some of those, and I have not brought the actual policy changes to the board. So we'll bring that to a future meeting. Okay. 1 second while I let Cami into the meeting. All right. So these are the current grant projects that we have developed. We've shown this many times with the number of passings, number of miles of fiber, and take rates, and the total fundings amount. The green is the areas for which we have received funding with separate green column. Total where we've been awarded, and then the two Southeast Jefferson County is our USA Reconnect grant and the WSBO grant, which we discussed last meeting. We're still waiting to hear a final word on that. Commissioner Tupper?
So, Will, unless there's a different slide, this one doesn't match the one in the packet. You have something here showing in betweens. They don't, oh, wait, I guess you do have it up there. Sorry.
Yep. Same one is in the
Could you
packet.
describe what that is, the in betweens?
Yeah, that's the one where we applied to the Washington office to pick up the areas in the Gardner area that were cut out by the toward Starlink that has since been rescinded. So we could pick those areas back up. And then originally we were planning to pay for those as adjacent areas, and this way we can have them fully paid for by a grant.
And so if you were to color code that on your map, where would those areas?
In the purple area, it turns the purple area into Swiss cheese.
Okay.
We haven't yet superimposed that layer on our public map because it'll essentially be the same zone. Okay, this is just a breakdown by funding category of the same grant projects. And what I've shown this slide before. The slide I want to discuss now is the reimbursements for the money that we have received and expended for these grants. We have now submitted for multiple reimbursements for equipment and engineering services received. And you can see the total amount billed and the total amount that has been received from those bills to the state agencies. We just put in for $836,000 last week, and we have another $400,000 invoice that we are waiting for it to be processed, and then we'll submit for that the following week. We are now doing an every other week reimbursement schedule. Reimbursements usually take a week to turn around for the state broadband office. Commissioner Collins.
Yeah, I see Commissioner Randall has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Ken. Will, could you just say for us and the audience of what it means, what progress we have to have had in order for us to prove that we deserve a reimbursement? What do you have to show so that it tells us what progress we've made on the actual whole program? So give us some examples, please.
So we're able to be reimbursed for any approved expense. We have to follow all of the procurement guidelines based for our own internal procurement and for the state and federal procurement guidelines. We show our strategies. We verify that we followed those guidelines, and then it's mostly just for the items purchased as they come in. We do have to track everything down to the individual item. We are having to break up multiple invoices and do line item. We're trying to get more efficient about how we set up these things from the start, but it's a fairly involved process, but it's any of our incurred expenses for materials or services. The biggest one is going to be the construction. We're months away from that beginning, and that will be per invoice paid to whoever is our construction contractor. But we can reimburse as soon as we paid the invoice.
Okay, so it sounds like what we can get reimbursement for right now is basically equipment that we've purchased and we have on hand, and services like engineering or something that we've ordered and it's been delivered and it's approved. Things like that is what we can bill for so far.
Correct. Yeah. And so our first reimbursements for the fiber that we actually purchased in 2021, and we have been reimbursed for a portion of that fiber. Some of it we have to wait until engineering is complete so we can be more accurate about how much of which exact fiber will go to a designated area. So we still have a good bit of inventory in stock that we can reimburse for, but we're just waiting for that engineering model to be completed before we do that. So this is a lot of the Calix equipment. It is over $1 million of fiber, also conduit, and then different fiber equipment. So on the 310 line we just put in for the 586,799, that check has already been cut. And then starting next week, I think Mike's team has set up an automatic deposit. So actually the state will turn around payments within 2 days once approved. But we're pretty good at the system now, so it's coming in quickly.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's just really helpful to understand that part of the equation, because we can't do any of this if we don't have money in the bank. And this puts money back in the bank, but it shows you what you've got to do to actually get that cash. So thank you for explaining all that.
We'll just continue this spreadsheet over the next year so you can track the money coming in and out. Okay, and then we're gonna move on. Oh, Commissioner Tupper.
Yeah, one other quick question on the 12/16/22 timeline there, you show the 907,000. I assume that was NTIA.
That's the NTIA Washington State
So as
Broadband.
as part of that agreement, we have to do an audit over $750,000 in federal funds that we expend in a year. Do we have an audit currently underway with that? And how does that work? Or explain that if you could too. And is that at our cost, or is that something we can use out of the loan funds, or how does that all work, the grant funds?
So we already have they call it a single audit. We're going to use the audit firm that did our RUS audit, and they come back in May to do that audit for us. Your question on, is it grant refundable? Don't know. But it is scheduled.
Yeah. The cost of the audit is approximately what?
Mike, do you remember? It's not very much.
I don't remember right offhand. I can find out. I'll let the commissioners know, but I don't think it's that much. I think part of it's included in the overall cost of everything.
Yeah, if you'll send out an email to the commissioners, Mike.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would assume it would show up in the auditing for the broadband business, that's a cost of, one of our costs of doing business. I'm just curious how you track that moving forward.
Yep, we will have those questions answered. So that's all I have for the reimbursement. As I said, we'll keep bringing the spreadsheet back with more updates as we go on, and we will have regular reimbursements from here on out. And the next sheet, another update of the take rate, where we are right now. Numbers I reported to you in the last board meeting. We're at 46 for Olympic Fiber Corridor. Jefferson North is at 48, 82 for Discovery Bay East, 42 for Port Townsend Business District. So we are overall at 47% take rate across the board. We are, as I explained to the JBAC group on Friday, we are actually taking a pause on outreach efforts because we want to finalize we want to have a better estimate of our construction dates before we really start doing another push. We don't want to engender a lot of frustration on our customers, keep telling them to get excited and then tell them it's 6 months again till we can even begin the process. Commissioner Collins.
So looking at the Discovery Bay take rate, if we're only funding installation for 60%, what provisions are we going to make for the 22% to make that affordable?
So that area, because it was so small, we pegged at 70%. But
Okay.
in the same sense, we have to decide on the construction charge that we're going to apply to anybody over 60%. All of the applications on the website are timestamped, so we know exactly when the threshold was met, and who's beyond that, we will have to reach out once we understand. And we did reach out in our last email to everyone saying that this would be coming. Doug and I are gonna talk about the model that we have applied, but we don't have a firm plan that will have to be developed with the commissioners on how much we want to put forward for the construction charge for adjacent and customers beyond the threshold. Commissioner Randall.
I would say I just think about, as you mentioned, Will, we've got this interest level now. I just want to keep the interest level. I don't want to have something happen where people suddenly say, you know what, this is taking too long, or, oh, now they're adding this fee on here. I want us to try and figure out what the deal is and hopefully keep the deal. So in my mind, the sooner that we can come up with a reasonable number, at least for, a given period of time, and that we can say, not only is it going to be, here's the amount, but if it's over, say, $100 or something, that they could pay that amount on a monthly basis over time. So it's a, on their monthly bill, it's a small thing, and that we don't lose people. I guess that's kind of my thoughts on it. And I'd be interested in Doug's thoughts too, but I just want us to have an offer that they can accept, and the offer doesn't change.
Yeah, I think that would be great. It makes the communication so much easier.
So
So
the
my-
question is, when can we do that? When can we at least get a decision that will last for a while, and we can always increase the hookup charge, at a later date if we need to for our business plan. But I just feel like we should do something soonish.
Well, since we're talking about it now, might as well tell you what we have in the business model. And it was something that was discussed, I think the last time that I was on with you guys. So what we have in here is that the charge would be $750, and it could be spread. It could be paid all once, but it could also be spread over 3 years, which is a little less than $21 a month. And so that's the concept we have built into the numbers. Obviously, you guys have to approve that concept, but that's what we've used in the model. So
Then that works out to how much a month? And do you have and you're basing that on something, you've got to make some assumptions. So did you figure that would be roughly half the cost of the average?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's about half the cost of hooking somebody up.
Yeah, guesstimated half the cost. Okay, and then for $750 for 3 years per month, what's the math on that?
It's like $20.83 a month.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Or I'm not. Okay.
So that kind of answered the question I was going to ask as to what you were thinking about bringing forward to us, because I know the process was going to be the commission would have to set that rate or set that fee or whatever it may be for all these different grant areas. And it's probably not going to be a uniform or a postage stamp type of an approach, I would think. Again,
No,
there'd
it
a lot
would
more-
be a posted, that would.
So
that is
whether
the-
there's 1,000 people within the grant area or 100, we would look at that fee being consistent across all grant areas. Is that
Correct.
interesting?
Yeah, so the thinking behind, and again, I wanted to discuss it at the end after we showed you how we built out the model, including that, but it's fine to talk about it now. The idea is that these are all customers who are right in the area where we're doing the construction. So it's not the same impact as if we were hooking up one person here or one person there. They're in the area where we're building the passings right by their driveways. Some of those driveways are going to be very long, and the expense is going to be more than the average, and then some of them will be less. But part of it is because this is a voluntary service, it's not like electric where they basically have to take it. We do also need to have a rate that is appealing and affordable. That is why we keep coming back to the $750 and the 3-year term to pay it off.
So I'll jump to the PTB while we're on this real quick. And because it's a loan, it's a little bit different setup here as far as the 1,200 versus the other costs that we're talking about for the residential.
Correct.
Are we collecting that $1,200 fee at all yet from because the infrastructure, from my understanding, is probably all in place or close to being all in place?
No,
It's not? Okay.
no.
So are we
We are not
collecting yet at
collecting
this
at
point?
this time. No, not until we have a better sense of when we can start construction. We're taking signups the same way we are for the rest of the areas, where it's basically a queue. And then once we have a sense of when we can expand in that area and do the connections, we will invite folks to sign up for a service order where they will have to pay. As you said, because it's a loan area, it's a $1,200 charge for Port Townsend Business District. This is only for businesses. They have to have a UBI to get the service. And they also, we're proposing that we do terms for them as well.
Commissioner Randall?
I just want to say that I think your approach to this is right on, because I think it's a numbers game, that we need a certain number of customers. Our goal is to get everybody in this county connected to fiber, and speed kills. The faster we go, I think the more success we're going to have. And if we're trying to accurately determine what the cost of hooking somebody up is, that would kill us in terms of how much time that would take. So while some would be more expensive and some would be less expensive, I think the speed of this is the important factor. And then if we looked at it too, it's not just, what you're getting is high speed fiber. You're not, and you're paying $750 because you weren't part of that first 60%. And what you're getting is not just that money isn't going just to pay to hook you up. It's part of what makes this whole thing work. And it's leveraging the millions of dollars of grants and federal funds we get. So I guess we could call that fee a bunch of different things if people needed explained to them about why they're paying $750. But it's not, in my mind, it's not just to get it to their house and our cost to do that. But I think having a flat number, I think, is important just because we don't have time to accurately determine what everybody's doing.
Correct. All right, can we move on to the next phase? Okay, so Doug, you want to take it from here?
You bet. So this is a look at the projected revenues. We've taken a fresh look and we've now redone the timing based upon the current estimates of construction. And so as you see, we're really not looking at the first customers here until the fall of this year. But after that, by next year, they start coming on fast and furious. You can see how the revenues climb in 2024. Now, remembering that these include 2 grants that aren't approved yet, but those, like the USDA grant doesn't even kick in until 2025. So that's not in this year or next year's number anyway. It's into the future. The most of the money, as you can see, is broadband. I mean, that's the primary product. We've got a little bit of money for telephone service. We do have quite a few sales of open access. You don't make as much on an open access connection, but you're certainly going to have some of those sold by the ISPs. That installation revenue is strictly right now in these early years. That's in fact, that line is only for those PWB businesses. So that shows them being connected starting this year into next year. Miscellaneous revenues are just tiny little things that go in the bill. And then there is a little bit of existing revenue. We just kept that as a separate line item than folding it in because it's under a different rate table, but that's there. And of course we estimate bad debt, but this shows, that the revenues grow quite steadily as we connect people up. This table, by the time we get out to 2027, we will explain here a little bit, but this actually goes up for illustrative purposes to 75% in each of those areas. And the reason we did that was to show all the cost of hooking up those extra people to see if we could cover that. You certainly may not get the 75%, but those early sales are very promising. I think two meetings ago that I was on here, where there was a lot of discussion, like, how do we know how we're going to do? And the fact is, you've gotten with just one round or so of marketing, you've already gotten between 40 and 50% of folks. I mean, you're going to very likely hit these numbers, remembering that these areas don't have any alternative for broadband. And so I think you're going to easily, I think you will surpass the grant amounts in all these. As Will said, that one little area is set at 70%. The grants for the other areas are set at 60%. So that's the target in most of those areas. And you can see the last slide, you're already at 43 to 47% in some of those areas, and you haven't started to break ground yet. So the revenues are straightforward. You guys approved the rates, not too long ago last year, and that's what's in here. So the math is pretty straightforward on revenues. So you want to go to expenses? Any questions on revenues?
Yes, I have one on revenues, Doug. So I get, the bulk numbers you're showing here, but it'd be nice for the metrics. And I get you threw the take rates out there, the projected take rates, but it would be nice to see the calculation for how many customers and at what rate they're paying, that we come up with the 61.7 or the 1,000,080 or the 2.2 million. It'd be nice for each year to see what those projections are to track, because the number could vary on the revenue. It would be interesting to be able to correlate the number of customers and what each customer is paying to that projected revenue.
And we have all that. They're just not on these slides. We can supply that here as a follow-up to the meeting. We have all that detail. So you bet. Be glad to provide it.
Doug, what generates the bad debt, and how were the estimates arrived at here?
The bad debt is simply a percentage of debt. You know, we've never seen anybody who doesn't have some customers who don't pay. You know, they may lose their job or somebody dies and it takes 2 months for them to tell you they're not there anymore. So it's a percentage of revenue. I think it's, looking at the math, if I recall, it's 2%. That's kind of looks right. So, but it's an estimated percent. We don't know your percent and hopefully it's lower than this. I mean, you have a fairly affluent area in some of these grant areas, but there's still going to be bad debt. It always happens. So,
Next slide. Oh, wrong button, too many buttons. One more.
all right. So this is the expenses. And I think that the question that was asked to bring to this meeting was to make sure that we're covering all of the costs. And so this is a list of all the kind of expenses that are in there. Cost of goods sold, I'll just run down the list. Cost of goods sold is buying wholesale voice and a few other little things. We're covering the vehicle expenses for the technicians who are doing the installations. There's tools to buy. The larger tools, test equipment is part of the capital, but there are some, hand tools and things that you buy every year. Building maintenance is actually really the electric utility bills. So this business will have an electric utility bill for power just like any other customer. That's basically what that number is. There's computer expenses for the employees' computers. Network maintenance is got a couple components. The largest component is labor of the new technicians. And I think Will's going to talk about the people and when they're coming on board here. There's also other things in there. There's a maintenance agreement with the electronics vendor that you pay because, that gives you priority access. It gives you update to software, and it gives you some amount of free repairs if cards go bad for warranties. So it's all sorts of things like that in there. It also includes, some estimated material for future years because there will occasionally be fiber cuts you have to repair. So some of that is in there. So maintenance is by far the biggest number. But again, the vast majority of it is labor. The maintenance contracts are on our own line there. Interconnection expense is very tiny. That's actually interconnection expenses is number portability, where folks change their phone numbers and want to keep their phone number when they come over to your system. And by the way, we expect a lot of the phone sales to be to businesses. They like to have one vendor for everything. The internet backbone is the cost to actually get you out to the internet. I know that looks very tiny, and that's because for right now you get a free 10 gigabits. Not free because you all pay a big fee to be in NOAANet, but as part of your NOAANet agreements, you get 10 gigabits of broadband. We're showing that you'll probably cross that threshold and need to buy more by 2027. That's when the number kicks up to a higher level. It's possible that could kick in a little bit earlier in 26, but it's going to be around that time frame. What these numbers are here in the beginning, as an ISP, you actually have to buy IP addresses. They're not free, so you have to go and buy those so that you can hook people up to the internet. So that's really all that's in here for the first 4 years. Help desk expense is mostly going to be an external contract. For right now, you've got your help desk with NOAANet. I haven't talked to Kevin in a while. I don't know if we've gone out for bid to see if there's anyone else we might buy that from, but that's a fee for someone who monitors the network. They're going to know about problems before anybody else. That's 24/7 monitoring. They can actually do some repairs to electronics without somebody having to make a truck roll. So that's all in a function called help desk. But it's another name for it would be network monitoring and that sort of thing. So that's an external function for now, NOAANet, and maybe eventually maybe somebody else or maybe always NOAANet. Advertising is really advertising and sales. We've estimated that to be $200 per new customer. This is probably too high because you really haven't spent a whole lot of money doing this and you're already over 40%. That may be not needed as much as that is budgeted in here. Customer service is labor mostly, and so there will be a new customer service rep hired. As you can see, it's partially in 23 because they don't come in until midway through the year. And then billing expense is just the cost of billing. People can pay their bills with credit card, they can pay with their bank account, they can have bills mailed to them. Each one of those has a specific cost associated with collecting your money. Software maintenance isn't very large, but you do have a billing software today that you have a module on top of your electric billing system that you got to pay some fees in order to use. It's not very big, but it's there. General accounting is additional general accounting just to track sort of this fiber stuff. And consultants are not just me, but all sorts of different kinds of consultants. It could be marketing, sales consultants, engineers who are not design engineers. I mean, it's all sorts of folks that you might hire for outside advice. The biggie on here is the allocated PUD overheads. Your formula for paying overheads is a formula based on revenue. And so you can see this gets to be very substantial numbers. And so not only all the numbers I mentioned before that are direct costs just for the fiber department. And I didn't mention it, but they have the existing employees in plus new employees. This is what you're spending today plus what's coming down the road. And these costs are to pick up a cost of everything else. This is a piece of Kevin and a piece of your board fees and just all that kind of stuff, everything that's in the back office at the PUD. This is something that's a little bit unusual because most startups of all types don't charge their new subsidiaries this kind of fee until it's completely on its feet. And so to have these fees kick in this early is a little extraordinary. And I'll show you why when we get to the profit slide. This would have you, for existence in 2024, paying $400,000 back to the PUD to cover their overheads at a year when the PUD also has to give you money that sort of washes each other out. So, and so you're essentially having the PUD give them money to turn around and give it back to them. It's kind of an unusual thing. That's something you're going to want to discuss as a philosophy. There's no law on it. You can some businesses, including municipal businesses, never charge it. Some charge it from day one, like we have in here. It's all a philosophy issue. It's really not an accounting or legal issue. So it's just unusual. And then state B&O taxes are real taxes that you have to pay in the state that, based upon the revenues. And so that they all add up to those operating expenses. And now the big question is, how does this compare, to the revenues? Let's put a slide on here and look at profitability and stuff. That's the next slide, right? Well, any questions on expenses? I should just stop there. So.
Thank you. Mr. Paisner?
Hi, thanks. Thanks, Doug. Does the internal costs I think it goes both ways. So there'd be the internal cost of the PUD using the broadband services one way, then the expense on the other side for attachments, use of facilities that the electric department owns. Are you just lumping that in as part of overhead and not doing a specific allocation? Just curious.
No, sir. Absolutely not that way at all. And so right now, the business plan does not have the utility paying its fiber bill. And this is really just a recognized share of all the general expenses, your fee, Kevin's expenses, the board's expenses, the accounting department's expenses, you name it, everything that's sitting at the building at headquarters, all that stuff as a category, a share of that comes back to fiber based upon a formula, which is the same formula you use for anything else that's not electric. And so it's strictly formula driven numbers that say the fiber business should pick up some share of the overheads. And so it doesn't at all say what they are because it's an equal share of all overheads. So, yep.
Commissioner Cooper?
So that makes sense. That's similar to what we do now with the water and the electric.
Exactly. This matches water. Exactly. Yes, sir.
So, and my concern with that number is, again, I think we need to have, a little bit of itemization moving forward, because this is where, if people dissect this budget or dissect these expenses and that, they're going to look at that and they're going to ask, is the electric subsidizing the broadband? Are the costs being tracked properly in a way that we're paying for pole attachments or whatever it may be on the broadband side, and electric is paying for their use of the broadband for SCADA, that sort of thing. So I think that is a very important line item there that needs a lot of granularity and a lot of itemization as we move forward. I would almost argue month to month to make sure that we don't get down the wrong path or we don't get into a bad habit. That costs are being tracked accurately and the monies are being, moved between the utility, whether it's the electric side to the broadband or the broadband to the electric. So that on that point. The other one is labor. Are we going to talk about labor? Because labor is going to be a cost when it comes to the expenses of this business plan. So I'll leave that to Will and Kevin on this, since it came up during this sheet and it's not on there. And then the other one is a question to Kevin that Doug brought up, knowing that the services we get now, where they are, are we going out to bid? Are we talking to NOAANET or do we look to do this completely in-house? I mean, what is the outlook for Doug's alluding to what NOAANET provides for us now?
So we use NOAANET's connection now. And it's not free. It's in our monthly bill that we pay NOAANET for NOC services. We do have a secondary path off the peninsula that we use from Astound. So we will continue to use the NOAANET for their services. We have a contract with them right now for the NOC. Doug is right. He pointed out we have looked around to other providers who do the NOC service and what that would cost us and how to move forward. We don't have a plan at this time, but we have looked around and got some pricing.
So we've got 2 internet feeds currently.
Correct.
Are they both following the same path or are they different paths? Is one over the bridge and the other up the peninsula?
Yes, different paths.
And will we have options if we decided not to continue with NOAANET to maintain that redundancy?
Yes, when you go out and purchase, you actually say, okay, we want a different path or we want to end up here or there. So we would purchase it based on not only the pathway off, but whether we wanted to be in Seattle or to Portland or to some other major CO.
So going back to Commissioner Tupper's question, the labor is
That's
where?
included in network maintenance, also some in customer service.
And to actually do truck rolls locally, where is that?
So, and this is a discussion we need to have also on the electric side. So if it's an expensed item, it would be in these numbers. And under the network maintenance is where a truck roll would be. If it is a capital portion of the job, then it would be in a different accounting system. So a truck roll could be, we're going to install a new customer. So that would
Yeah.
be one truck roll. If it's to do a repair, it would be in
That's-
the maintenance.
Yeah,
type.
that's really what I'm asking, maintenance.
And that
Well,
is-
and let me discuss that a bit because I should have mentioned it on the network maintenance line. We've got a pretty substantial amount of the labor going to capital because your technicians will be doing the installations. And we want to put that in capital because that's how we get reimbursed from the grants. When they build a drop, we will take their time and the materials, and that's what we will submit to the grant offices. So we have to charge it to the capital because that's the only way to get the grants to reimburse us. So the numbers left in here for labor are the percentages that we think will be for the expense side. It's very possible the larger the percentage of drops that your own folks installed, the smaller that line would get. It could be quite a bit smaller than this. We've been a little conservative in the favor of showing more expense, but it's possible that most of their time could go to drops between now and 2027. And so that those amounts get fully reimbursed. So.
Commissioner Tupper.
So one quick follow-up on what Will said under network maintenance, that includes the labor. So we have one network engineer that probably accounts for 40% of this $375,000 number in 2023. We can't run a system on one employee. You know, when you talk about the truck rolls and the other stuff that goes into it. So by the end of 2023, what is our actual labor cost to start delivering service, which we plan on delivering service before the end of the year, is my understanding. How many employees what does that look like? How many employees are we projecting in 2023 to hit this 375,000? If it's just employees alone, I'm assuming there's other things in there in that network maintenance besides labor. But
Well, let me tell you what the plans are here. We have another fiber person, a senior fiber person coming on in May, projected, another one in July. So that would be three outside people. And then actually there's four because the network engineer is already here. We have the first technician in May, then one in July, and one in September. So it'd be 4 total people in the technical department by September. That's assuming that you can find them and hire them, but that's what's in this model. On top of that, the customer service rep is projected to be added in August. That would be, and the plans for that person is really a specialty customer service rep. The normal customer service is handled through the electric existing reps. There's really no incremental new cost. Mostly they just take that initial order and that, that's pretty much it. But that person will specialized in taking care of businesses and any real problems that folks have. So that's why that's just one person being added. So that would have you 5 direct fiber employees by the end of the year. So
I think that's the kind of granularity as we see these numbers. To put it into context, we need to understand that and see the timing of, what we expect or when we expect those hirings or, that level of service to start being put out to the public. It needs to kind of accompany these numbers. Otherwise, to me, it's just another number that I don't know where it came from. So that's the kind of metrics. That's the kind of I'll call it into the weeds, if you will, but I don't see how we can make sense of a lot of these numbers without that level of information. And again, that's a metric to track success or failure, or whether we're on course, whether we need to speed up or slow down. To Commissioner Randall's point earlier, faster is better. I'm not in that camp. I'm in the camp of show me the numbers.
So one of the things we're working on here, this is our business plan model. So these are numbers that we've developed with Doug to make sure that everything pencils out and to use as the basis for all of our grant application. Our next step is to develop our business tracking within our own systems. We're still working on that internally because we're working with Moss Adams right now on setting up a chart of accounts and making sure that everything is in its proper place and that we can report efficiently. Mike's team is doing that. So we will have more reports in the future that more closely represent the actual expenses and the actual chart of accounts based on our system. Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we're finalizing we're charging some stuff now already to broadband, hopefully here within the next month. We'll have the chart of accounts set up completely. Moss Adams. I just sent it off to Moss Adams to do one more final review. And then we'll be able to track it just like we do electric, just like we do water. So we will be able to get you all that information just like we do for water and electric. So it'll all be there.
And we've presented before on our staffing plans. The ultimate plan is to have 6 employees in 2023, 2 network techs, 2 network installers. We're calling it like a service or customer service / network monitor, and then the network engineer. So that's the 6 dedicated broadband employees. And that, like I said, that won't be until 2024 that we have all of them in place.
And I appreciate all the work that staff is doing to get that stuff put together. For me, it's timing. Again, as we're going to be asked to set rates for this beyond the 60 or 70% take rate, as we're going to look at what our wholesale rates, whether we need to change those again or not. Things like that, whether we're going to borrow more money, we need to have that information before we're asked to make those decisions. I think staff needs to be mindful that we don't get that information and have to make a decision the same day, right? We need some lead time to understand, here's what we're gonna do, here's why we're doing it, and here's what's gonna happen, and not it all be disjointed, out of sequence, that we make a decision before we know why we're doing that.
Yeah, we're kind of caught right now between the theoretical and the actual. This is kind of the end of the theoretical. If we come, the theoretical is what we've needed for all of our grant proposals. We will have more grant proposals. I'm going to warn you, the staff may bring more loan requests. We will try to limit it as much as possible. But those may be coming in the future. We still have a couple thousand customers in different pockets that we want to pick up over time. So those will be coming back. But for now, we're basing things on, and we're working hard to set up the accounts properly to build what is an entirely new division. And it's been a lot of internal work, creating all of these new processes and looking at the history of how we've done things and using this as an opportunity to get it right from the start. And looking at how we can make improvements, and especially with the pressure of the federal funding, we have to have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed, and we're working very diligently to do that. Okay. Doug, you want to go to the next slide?
You bet. Well, I would like to address the third question that was asked, which is on is electric subsidizing fiber or fiber subsidizing electric? The two things that are missing from this calculation would be, because you already mentioned them, would be would be fiber paying for pole attachments, and would be for electric to pay their fiber bills. Other than that, there's this line item of overheads. We could do that math for you at some point. I'm pretty positive that by the time we get out here, even to 2027, that fiber is actually going to be subsidizing electric. And subsidizing is not the right word. Fiber will be profitable, and the PUD, will probably elect to pull some of those profits out. That's not a subsidy. That's a success thing. So subsidy is really the wrong word. But the fact is, fiber, as you will see on the profit charts, looks to have a definite positive margin in the future. And the reason for all that is, remember, most of these customers have been covered almost 100% by grants. That's what makes it pretty quickly possible. If this was all funded directly, it wouldn't be profitable for 12 years. But this turns very quickly profitable, which is the next slide. So,
And Doug, if I could add just one thing. Oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Randall?
I appreciate everything that's being said, and I think this is really awesome to have a business plan like this. The question I have is, can we somehow take these numbers and call it like our draft 2023 broadband business plan? Because I think these numbers will be really healthy over time for us to come back to track actual performance over what our assumptions were when we really jumped into this thing. We jumped in, we committed, we set rates. And then as we go forward in time, because I think one thing that could happen is you could keep updating these numbers to make them accurate. But I think one of the things that would be nice is to have these numbers as a benchmark, so that as we get into the future, we can say, well, we're not as profitable as we thought we'd be because, the following things have now happened, or we're making more money than we thought. And I think it would just be nice to have these, some version of these numbers not change over time, so that then it gives us a way to say, well, we need to increase these fees a little bit, or, oh, we can actually hold off on increasing fees because we're making more than we thought. So just a request to somehow memorialize this plan in some fashion or form, so we can, and an example is, if NOAANET had done something like this when they first started, they wouldn't be looking at a $10 million hole on their pension. So I think it's important for decision makers like the board to know what the assumptions were in the beginning when they started a venture.
I completely agree. And in fact, I don't want to put words in your staff's mouth, but my spreadsheet needs to, at some point, for at least turn to a formal budget. And once it's in a budget, you get that monthly tracking of, here's what we thought we would do, here's what we actually did. So that's really the way you're going to get there. Tracking things on spreadsheets just drives people nuts. So we want to get it into the same budget system you have for water and electric, and you would get those reports every month. And that's exactly where you need to get to. I don't know what point this year you get there for the 2023 column, but there's no way in the world you should enter the 2024 year without that budget in place first. I mean, absolutely. So completely agree.
Yeah, and I think our plan is to have it by June at the latest, and we'll have interim versions as well, but where we
Yeah.
have it. One thing I did want to add, though, is that when we talk about that excess cash that might be generated, it is staff's intention to expand the network if we can to folks that want it. So a lot of that, if there is extra cash, we would like to use that to expand to other areas, which will eat up a lot of that extra cash. Now, if the board has a different idea on how they want to use the cash, then that is your choice, but that is staff's intention going forward.
But that is a discussion for 3 and 4 years from now. So
And then
we have a little bit of time to talk about that.
The last statement I was going to make, is because we are a public entity operating within a private marketplace, you know, the public's perception is if we're quote unquote making money, why aren't you lowering our rates? That's going to be one of those things we're going to hear on the broadband side, just like we would on the electric or the water side down the road. So I get reinvestment into the network. That's one of the angles we say, well, no, here's where the money is going and why.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So again, I get that. I just don't want to make sure, because the word profitability or profit was thrown out there. That in our world is a bad thing. PUDs aren't supposed to be profitable. And so people need to understand there's going to be a division here between where the public PUD ends and where maybe the private PUD begins with the broadband stuff. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the future.
Mr. Paisner.
Thank you. Small reminder on that score that you have a very specific service territory that you have an exclusive monopoly in on the electric side, and you don't have the same exactly on the telecom side. Now, some would argue a fiber connection to the home gets you pretty close, but you're still in a competitive business. And while, you know, you want to reduce your electric rate or keep them as affordable as possible, the market helps set your prices on telecom.
This next chart, I guess I need a little reminder on the colors here. Yearly, this is yearly margins. You can see the margins, you know, they're a little negative in the beginning because there's no revenues in 23, very little. So obviously the expenses are greater than revenues now. Even by 2024, that line gets crossed where the revenues quickly grow to cover the expenses. And, you know, you can see by 26 and 27, you know, the revenues are quite a bit more than expenses. And the green line is where those accumulate. And so the accumulated excess cash gets put in there. Now, this is just comparing expenses because there's also outlays for capital and matching funds for grants and things to come out of this. And we'll get to that here, I think, in the next slide. But this shows the trend is certainly upward. So this is the cash flow statement, and it's sort of it's not the same one Mike would do. It sort of condenses everything down to one short page because normally this would be much longer presentation, but it shows all the sources of cash coming in and it shows the cash going out. And so the first line at the top is the net cash provided by operations. That's the revenue minus expense line. And so you can see, you know, there's some losses certainly in 23. The losses actually are pretty tiny for 24, and by 25 revenues should be exceeding expenses. The second, capital assets, these are all those building costs that are being paid, fiber engineers, everything that was mentioned earlier. And then there's, you know, then all those lines from federal grants and state grants and county grants and loans, that's how you pay for all those things. So that's the money coming in that helps to cover all of those construction costs. And so that goes the whole way down. The first one that's something different than loans and grants is the PUD matching funds. And so that's money that you're obligated by these various grants to pay. The assumption is in most years, the PUD is already agreed to put in 500,000 of property tax each year. That pretty much covers it, except in 23, that's not quite enough to cover that matching. So you're going to have to put a little extra in. But then in future years, that's not there. The bottom line property tax revenues, that shows that still coming in 25, 26, 27. I mean, that's something you'll just have to decide in the future. If the business becomes self-supporting at some point, you'll want to use that money somewhere else in the PUD. Will tell you they want to use it forever to build, and you'll have those theoretical discussions probably for the next 7 years. The principal payments will kick in starting in 2024. We have 2 loan tables coming up to see those in more detail. We'll show you those in a section. The customer connections, that's for the folks who are paying that assumed $750 fee. So we assume that you probably won't have very many of those until 2025. I mean, you could have a few in that little tiny area that we talked about that only has 74 people in it. There might be some of that this year or next year, but for most of the grants, you won't cross those grant thresholds probably until starting in 2025. And then folks have 3 years to pay those fees. Now, some folks won't do that. They'll just send you a $750 check and be done with it. But that's the assumption that's how that line item is calculated. And it certainly just comes back in to help pay for all the other costs. And then finally, the last line is the property taxes you put in. We started out with a 0 for cash. I mean, you've never really had a broadband department. And so we're saying in 2022, because there really wasn't a department, it starts with 0. You had a small loss for last year. This is not according to your audit. That number could actually be slightly positive or slightly different. We didn't exactly audit those numbers yet. You will get a real number at some point when you get a full audit and figure that out. But mostly fiber kind of paid for itself in 2022. Then it's, pardon me, it does show that, the net increase decrease in cash line is the important line. You will definitely be in the hole for this year. That's simply of the timing of revenues and expenses. Next year, that cuts in half. By 2025, that's a positive number, which means by 2025, you've completely made up those 2 lost years and have an additional 500,000. So that by the end of 2025, you will have covered all expenses of the outlays. And so we'll have to talk about how you want to fund that. That's something that you just pay out of electric. You could make an internal loan for this year and next year, but it gets paid very quickly. That money should come back. It shows by the end of 25, it probably comes back half or a third of the way through 2025. So there is a short period of time of losses to cover over and above the 500,000. And so, but those do not last long. After that, then, you continue to generate cash every year. So this shows total cash generated by 2027 of 567,000. Will already told you he intends to use every penny of it. But that, again, that's a theoretical discussion out there. Remembering now that in this same math, by 2027, this business plan has you paying something like $2.5 to $3 million of those internal overheads. If you didn't do that, you would have a whole lot more cash at that bottom line. So again, that's another theoretical decision of when do we start actually charging the overheads to this business? Do we give it a chance to get on its feet, or do we make it pay from day one? No right or wrong answer, but that's a discussion that I think you definitely need to have. So the good news is this shows you getting to a very good place. I mean, again, that's because these grants are so highly funded. Remembering also there's 2 grants in here that you haven't won. If you don't, the big one of those is the Reconnect grant. And if you don't win that one, there's other grants coming up in the future, which means that you would most likely almost be guaranteed to win because they're the federal BEAD grants. And so those grants would just shift out another year or 2. So the Reconnect columns from Will's earlier slides, if you don't win that grant, would be slid out probably another 2 years, which actually gives the business more time to get on its feet. But it's better. This is a numbers game. The more customers you get, the more profitable you are. It would be better to win the Reconnect now than to get the money 2 years later. we think you have a very good chance at that. You had a very high scoring. Reconnect really loves the fact that you're open access, and that alone gave you extra points that hardly anybody else has. So we think there's a very, very high chance that you win that grant. I think we're probably a few months away from knowing that or not. So, that's basically the presentation. The fact is, this has a very positive trajectory for cash. The bad news is you got a little bit of hole to cover this year, next year. That money comes rolling back very shortly thereafter. And even in those years, if we didn't charge the overheads, that wouldn't be hardly any money at all. So in 2024, we're showing that you're 271,000 in the hole, but in 2024, the other chart showed you paying more than that of electric overheads. So that's a little bit of funny money. You would give yourself the money and give it back again. So, that's a discussion to definitely have on the topic. So that's sort of the bottom line of the finances. We can certainly answer questions today, or we can follow up with a couple of questions were asked of actually showing you more detail on some of the assumptions, and we can certainly do that. So.
Questions, comments?
I guess we need to show the loan tables yet. That's one thing that are still on here. Just you had asked to see those. The PWB loan has an incredibly low 0.42% interest rate. And so you can see the annual interest expense is really tiny. I mean, it's a total loan of nearly $2 million, and you pay, $7,000 a year that decreases every year in interest expense. So I've never seen anyone get a loan such a low interest rate before. So that's obviously subsidized by the state. So there you go straight into principal payments starting in 2024. The next slide is the Reconnect loan, and we've been very conservative and put this in here at 4%. You may qualify for 2% money. We're not really going to know the interest rate you get until you actually win the grant and sit down with them. They won't talk about that ahead of time because they don't talk theoreticals. They only talk to people who win grants. And so if you win that grant, that's a number we'll know fairly quickly. There's a really good chance that it's less than 4%, but we've got the 4% built into here just in case. But this program does have rates as low as 2%, and those are not they're dictated by Congress rules that have nothing to do with the actual market interest rates out in the real world. These are government interest rates, so it's either going to be 2 or somewhere around 4. So anyhow, both of those loans are pretty long term. Like this loan doesn't get paid off till 2042. So it is a substantial amount of interest at 4%. The number's literally cut in half at 2%. So.
And is that a 20-year? I saw other paperwork along the way here. I thought it might have been longer than.
Well, we can actually, again, that has to be negotiated too. We could possibly get a 25-year. So that's also possible. We've assumed 20-year. It's almost going to be one of the two, either 20 or 25. So 25 would be even better, that the annual payments would go down. And so, that's just something we can't know until we actually are granted at, and then you literally sit at the table and negotiate with them. So, so that's something that once they give you a grant, they kind of act like a bank. So it's kind of an interesting process. So.
We're mandated and stuck with the network for a minimum of 15 years with these grants. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, these are 75, 100-year assets, a lot of them. So I think you're going to be stuck with them for a lot longer than that.
Well, I noticed that the ratio between PUD dollars and grant money is a little bit less than 1 to 30.
I think I've told you all before, I work all over the country and I don't know anybody who's been successful getting grant funding as you guys. I mean, the number of 100% grants you've gotten is just astounding. I mean, Will decide, I try to give Will a gold star every time I talk to him because no one else has been this lucky or good, whichever it is. So it's pretty phenomenal that this is a very small county contribution for the size of the money that you're getting. So.
So please continue.
I think that's the end of our presentation.
Yep, that's it.
There's two more slides on changes to policy and rates, but we're not going to move forward with those at this time. We will be bringing that to the board probably in the second meeting in April.
So thank you very much for a very informative presentation. And I look forward to the ongoing reports that will be tracking revenue, and there'll be first tracking expenses and then tracking revenue coming in. And this is exciting. It feels a little bit of climbing out on the limb, but without assuming any risks. That means you don't get the potential rewards, and ultimately, this is going to be a huge benefit to the county. I currently have two different sources of internet feed for businesses that we run out of the house, which have to do with telehealth, and neither one is reliable. One is point-to-point wireless, and the other is our friends at CenturyLink. And there are times when neither one of them works very well. And when you're doing a session with a client and your connection gets dropped, that's pretty damn frustrating for both us and for the person on the other end. So this is potentially an enormous benefit for the county. Commissioner Randall.
Yeah, I want to second your comments, Ken, that I think it's really important. It's a huge accomplishment, what's been done so far. And I really appreciate staff and Doug in putting together all these tables, because I think, we're going fast, but it's really important to monument and document at times where we are and where we're going. And I was just thinking of, it reminds me of, as you're talking about how successful this is, that it's kind of unprecedented. The Lewis and Clark expedition was unprecedented too. And those folks were traveling across the country, seeing new things. And every night, the captains of that expedition had to write copious notes in their diaries about what they had done that day. They're probably completely exhausted, and now they have to do that too. So I appreciate, Will, everything you guys are doing. You're creating something from literally nothing.
I think
You're working
risk
super.
is less than Lewis and Clark.
Well, I don't know. Bringing broadband to Jefferson County is kind of a Lewis and Clark expedition like thing. So, but I think it's really hard when you're leading and you're doing something new. So I really appreciate everything that what you've been doing.
Pitchforks and torches still exist.
Can I just say thanks to Doug Dawson for all of the help. Doug came in to help with our strategic plan and gave us a very no-nonsense look at the success for this venture, saying pretty much it would not work unless we had all grant funding and retail rates. Those things have happened, and he's been essential in helping guide us at every step. So thank you, Doug.
You bet. I just want to remind you all that a lot of the folks on Lewis and Clark died on the way home. I hope you all do better than that.
That is a misconception. Nobody died.
Nobody died.
Only one guy died, and he died on the way out from what they think was appendicitis. They made it there and back with nobody dying.
There you go. All right.
So, again, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Doug. You've been a great partner. Appreciate it, Doug.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
thank you also. And I understand word on the street has it, Doug, that you're a longtime Grateful Dead fan. And I look forward at a certain point of looking back and saying, what a long, strange trip it's been.
You bet. So yes, I am kind of known for that. Yes.
Thanks for all the information. Okay.
Moving forward, the next item of business is item number 4, the five-way agreement approval.
So I'm gonna start, this is the second time we've looked at this contract for the five-way. While ago, 2 years ago, we approved it for the first time. This is the second time we're bringing it back to the board for approval. The only change that I'm gonna bring up, there was a few minor changes, but the major change is in the amount we're contributing to the EDC. In the first go around, we were 30,000. In this go around, we're 40,000. And so that's the major change. We are asking the board to approve this. Is there discussions? Oh, that screen just drives me crazy.
know.
I have to, have to look. We do feel that the EDC is turning a corner. It seems like the process has been slower than what I really wanted and felt they could do. But with Sydney and stuff, we are getting to a place where it needs to be. And this funding actually allows them to have some certainty. It gives them the ability to go out and hire people and do more without saying, well, we don't have enough funding, but we'll fund you for 6 months. So I do think it's important that we increase our contribution. And so that's why it's there. I do know the county and the port have approved this. I don't know about the city yet, but we are asking for approval. Questions?
Commissioner Cooper?
I would, again, I would hope, with ratepayer funds that, there's accountability. So I would expect and hope is, that EDC is going to get a lot more money from the PIF board and from each of the participating entities, that they will have the staff and will be available to start, giving us a little bit more regular update on what it is, they're doing and how that's benefiting the PUD. I think that would be fair for that ask. Other than that, I don't have any issues.
Commissioner Randall?
And just having attended a, a couple of board meetings in Dan's absence, I think that's what he's asking for is a very reasonable request. I think it is important that the EDC show their work and how they're benefiting the community. And just for the record, the 40,000 we're kicking in is being matched by the port and the city, and the county is obviously kicking in like 90-some thousand. And I think the question of why are we doing this? It's kind of like when the PUD got into the electrical business, we created, we're doing things that didn't exist before for this county, and we're doing it with local money. And I think that's what we're trying to get out of the EDC. It's getting to a point where as a county, we've got a strategic economic development plan that harnesses and is in collaboration with the private businesses in our county. We have strategic plans for trying to attract certain businesses. We've got resources that are going to retaining our existing businesses, and we're all working together. And I think this just, I think there's been a lot of discussion in this community around economic development at times about why is it happening that way. Sometimes growth management got thrown in and was being beat up in the Economic Development Council, and it wasn't healthy and it just wasn't happening. And if we hadn't have had this 4-party agreement, we wouldn't be here. And I think we're just starting to see the EDC grow into what it could become down the road. And I hope that we see the kind of success at the EDC that we've seen at the PUD and its positive impacts to the county. So I appreciate my other commissioners' support on this. And I think Dan's requests are very reasonable, and I think they'll be able to follow through on that. So with that, I'll make a motion that I guess I should get this thing in front of me. Is there let's see, does it say what you're asking for? I guess it's a motion to authorize the commissioners signing the revised agreement, the four-party agreement. Or
Correct.
is it- okay,
I think it's a five-party agreement.
there, you're correct. 1, 2, 3. Is the EDC a party to it too?
EDC is included.
Okay, so yeah, the 5-party agreement. That is my motion.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the revised multi-party agreement with EDC Team Jefferson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have approved the 5-party agreement.
Thank you very much.
Next item on the agenda is the manager's report.
Yes, and I'd like to take a quick 2-minute break and then I'll come back if that's okay.
So you want to pause the recording for 2 minutes?
Do we have to adjourn?
Joel, do we have to adjourn? To
No.
pause?
No.
We have now resumed recording. Mr.
Yes, we have a guest here. I brought in Drew from the PUD staff. Just related a story. On Friday, I visited with a advocate for low-income homeless that really had a difficult week. He had a lot of people he visited with, and the job of being an advocate is very stressful. It takes a lot of you emotionally and mentally. And he made the comment to me that really a bright spot in his week was dealing with the PUD and Drew specifically. It picked him up, and I don't think people realize the PUD, how we do affect our community. We affected this person in such a way, he reached out to me to thank me and let me pass this on to Drew, that in his capacity as a PUD employee, it made a difference in our community. It made a difference with the low income. It made a difference with some of the most challenging people in our community. So I'm just here recognizing Drew for, he does a job every day. Did a great job last week, and it made a difference in our community. So, thank you
very much.
So,
You.
I do my best to try to help our community. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, thanks, Drew. I know what a good job you guys do. How long you been with the utility, and did you start out where you are? Or did you move up within the utility?
Coming up on 6 years with PUD. I started out as a CSR and recently moved into the position of low income. And I take my job very seriously.
and you do a great job.
Much. I appreciate that.
Keep up the good work, Drew.
Yay, Drew.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Will, I'm gonna go up into the next topic. And I will say this, and I talked a little bit to Annette. We're in the process of rebuilding a transformer that is gonna cost us $400,000. We're gonna buy a new transformer that's gonna be over $700,000. And a lot of people don't know much about transformers, how they work, or how they're rebuilt. So I'm going to show a couple quick slides and talk a little bit about why the costs are so much and how the PUD benefits from what we're doing. Will may have to help me.
Just
Will
on a-
is gonna help. me
just on a
because I was doing
Just
something
on a
wrong.
side note, when we were in DC, there was a lot of discussion about transformers and some of the legislation that may or may not be coming our way. And one of them had to do with the construction of transformers using amorphous steel versus grain steel. I don't know if that's something you want to get into this discussion or not, but you know, the effects that supply chain and where stuff is manufactured, and especially when it comes to getting grants, you know, America First does restrict you on how you're able to get the things you need for the price you need to get them for.
So. and you can go if you want, or stay.
I need
It's your
to.
call. Okay,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So. Real quick, this is what everyone sees as a substation transformer. It's a tank filled with nobody knows what. So inside the tank is mineral oil. Inside that tank, there's core steel. If you look at the piece that looks like an M, that's a specially grained steel. And that is what causes all the delays in transformers. That steel is hard to come by. And in our case, on the rebuilt transformer, we believe that steel is in good shape. On the type of failure we had on our transformer, we believe it's based on the coil of the transformer, not the steel. So this is a substation transformer, three-phase steel core that's put together. And it's literally a piece of steel, a space piece of steel. Around that core, they ran copper. Copper is fairly easy to get a hold of, so that doesn't cause delay. Now, another component of the inside of the transformer is a paper. There's a cellulose component to the paper that you can test in oil sample to see if your paper is going bad. But what we feel happened with our transformer, specifically at Port Ludlow, is the winding shorted out. And if you look on this, the windings will short between the gaps on the transformer core itself. So they'll be short across. This transformer did short in 2012, right before we purchased the system. It was a lot of times a small short will burn itself clear. And then if you monitor it and do certain things, the oil will clean itself out. In the case of our failure, it was catastrophic. And in a catastrophic failure that we had, this is the oil samples. And a lot of times what you're really looking at is your acetylene levels. And this is, the acetylene is caused by arcing between the two copper wires, and it builds up acetylene, ethylene, and methane. There's some numbers in here, and these are combustible. But based on this, we're very comfortable that our fault was due to a winding failure, which means our core steel is good. So that's one of the reasons we're recommending to send it off to be rebuilt. They will reuse the core steel, they will reuse the tank, and they will basically rewrap the core steel with the copper so it looks very similar, and then move that transformer forward. So that was real quick understanding of the transformer. All of this, the mineral oil is the insulation. And the reason the mineral oil is there is so that the outside tank can be built smaller. It does insulate it so that you don't need as much air gap if it was a dry pack type transformer. So we do have one company that has come back with some close dollars. Until they actually pull it apart, they'll give us estimates. Their estimate is right at 400,000. It's a pinch over. We are talking to 2 other manufacturers that do rebuilds. We will take their numbers and then be able to ship the transformer off. Shipment right now has tripled. We originally thought, in the 2 years ago, shipment would be 5,000. We were told estimate 20 for the shipment one way. We're probably going to pay 30 to ship it one way and then back. So those costs, the shipping continues to go up. But we do feel we will be able to get somebody to rebuild it for approximately 410,000.
But the shipping would be the same whether you're repurposing one or buying new, correct? Or no?
The shipment on a new transformer depends where it comes from. We do have a little bit of option now on shipment because one of the factories we're looking at is Idaho. The other factory is in Kansas. So the shipment is more. So that does play a little bit more of a thing in our costs here. With the new transformer, they do make transformers in Pocatello, Idaho. Virginia Transformer, that's the one we have there now in Port Ledlow. So in their hard dollar bid, they do have an advantage over a factory on the East Coast. The last thing I'll say about transformers is we're reviewing our design right now of what we bought in the past. We believe we're going to go with a little different type of transformer. And by that is whether we will go with a grounded Y or ungrounded Y on the high side. We're hoping that we have the new specification out to bid by the middle of April. And then it'll be a 2-year time frame after that. So real quick update on where we are on the transformer and why. Any questions?
So looking forward, not knowing for sure what growth in the county will look like and things like that, are we looking at larger capacity transformers or changing the grid incrementally, or could you give us some inclination into how we're determining what size we need?
So right now, the transformer specifically that we're going to purchase, the new one, will be for the Quilcene area. For today, that's where the design will go. We are replacing that with a 20 MVA transformer. We have 20s now in all of our substations except Quilcene, which is a 5, and Chimicum, which is a 25. I believe our overall engineering goals will be to put 2 transformers side by side per substation so that if you have a failure, you can automatically switch over to the new substation or the new transformer.
So you're making them interchangeable.
They not only interchangeable, but they could be ran together or they could pick up the load of the other one. If you go with that philosophy, we don't need to buy 25 MVA transformers. We're better off to go with 2 20s than we are with the larger transformer. So that's kind of where we're at, that we will keep at the 20s.
Mr. Roglin, you have a
What's the worst case risk for getting the transformer rebuilt? I mean, the estimate is $400,000, but they don't have it opened up yet. I mean, what would be if they found additional damage inside, or if the steel inside was bad? What would be the worst case? The reason I asked, I had to have my Explorer repaired. The first estimate was $2,500. The ultimate was $6,000.
So the worst case scenario, let's say, is we would pay for the shipment and the detanking of the transformer. Literally, they cut the top off, pull it out, and then they can find it. So that much we would have out. At that point, we would say, no, there's too much damage. It's not worth another 200,000. At that point, the manufacturer or the remanufacturer we send it to, they'll give us credit for the copper and the steel and the tank. And we won't recoup all of our costs, but we'll recoup a good portion of them. And a lot of times, then they will go ahead and rebuild it on their own and sell it as a rebuild. But in our case, we would be out a little bit of money, but not a ton.
You have to buy a new transformer.
We would buy 2 new transformers instead of 1 new transformer. And the goal with the rebuild would then go back to Port Ludlow. It would be a new bay at Port Ludlow, so you'd have a brand new one and the rebuilt one. So that if anything failed, you could fail over. And a couple of the new circuits we're talking about coming out of Port Ludlow substation would be off of the rebuilt transformer.
Would the money be better spent doing that than rebuilding a transformer? Would the better money be better spent buying two 20 kV transformers than rebuilding the transformer?
Our estimate, it's gonna save us at least $300,000 to rebuild it than it is to buy a new one. So at that price, I believe it is worth having it rebuilt. And with the rebuilt transformer, you get a 2-year warranty like you do with a new one. And truly, you saw the picture of the transformers, there's not moving parts. It's
Pretty robust.
it's core steel and copper around some wood and so I am comfortable with rebuild. Some utilities would not rebuild it. They would just say, hey,
Yeah.
let's spend this.
Tucson Energy won't rebuild them.
No, that's not true.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
That's what I was told.
They may not now, but for example, at our Discovery Bay substation, it is a rebuilt transformer. And we bought that from PSE. So sometime in their past, they did rebuild.
Engineers tell me now that they don't. They may rebuild them in the future, but right now they're not rebuilding. That's what I was told.
Part of our decision too has to be, if we send off this to be rebuilt, I can get it in a year. If I purchase a new, it is 2 years out. So like I say, it is right now, $300,000 is a huge amount of change to basically get a new transformer back. They replace all the insulators, they replace all the outside pieces.
Essentially new.
It is new.
Essentially new.
It is the quickest way to have a spare on hand, is it not? Because we do not have a spare at the moment.
We could move a transformer from Irondale. If we had a failure, we could move a transformer. It's not ideal, but we could. There are other ways to buy a used transformer, maybe a little quicker. Now, we have looked for years on the used market, and because of the type of transformer PSE uses, the YY Delta, it's very difficult to find a match at our voltage. It's extremely hard. And we do look. If we would find one, we would bring it back to the board, but they're just not out there.
Oh, Commissioner Randall, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Kevin, I appreciate your creativity as always in trying to find the best deal for Jefferson County residents. I appreciate the photos and the explanation of how these things work. And I think it makes a lot of sense to, if this thing's not precious metal, but hard to get metal. And it's a big one hunk piece of metal that they presumably probably resurface or do whatever with it, clean it. And I think your assumptions are good of what's happening in there. And I really appreciate also that you're taking a long-term view of trying to standardize the equipment in our substations and make us more resilient so that in the future we'll have more flexibility to deal with growth and more ability to deal with failures when they happen. So this all sounds like a great plan.
Do you have any additional report for us, Mr. Street?
I do have a discussion, and I'm hoping Joel will join in on this discussion with me. For many months now, we've been looking at pole attachments and joint use on the electrical side. Because of some change, so many things that we have to do on the joint use. We have things that are happening that we really need some help on. We are gonna look at bringing in an attorney's group to help with our joint use. We hopefully will be sending out letters now to all the vendors in Jefferson County. We will have completed our standards for new construction. We're putting in place a new process for construction on joint use. One thing that was talked about at a conference Will and I attended back in Washington, DC was joint use now does pertain to conduit. So that we have spare
Hey,
conduit.
Kevin, we need, before you go further on that, I need to adjust your comments, but go ahead.
No, go, Joe.
So it's not exactly right that conduits.
That's why you're here.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. I guess I'll pull back a little bit and just say that there's a couple things going on as the PUD gets ready to actually start deploying its facilities to supply broadband to customers. And as we get ready to do that, we're starting to look at pole contacts and the status of our power poles and where our facilities are going, what our joint users and pole attachment users have on our poles. And at the same time, we've taken a look at our current pole attachment agreement, and we've updated that with some current regulations. And the goal is to get the new pole attachment agreement out to all our ISPs, all the wholesale users of our facilities, and anyone who's attaching to our poles. So with that, we've found a couple things out there and that I'm concerned about. And it could be, I hope I'm wrong, but there could be some issues with our wholesale provider ISPs and the use of our facilities, both pole attachments and conduit. So Kevin had contacted Keller Heckman, a fellow by the name of Jim Baller, who's a national expert in this area. He's worked with and for NOAANET for couple decades. He worked alongside Don Cohen at Gordon Thomas in his work at Pacific PUD's successful claims against CenturyLink and Comcast and the like over pole attachments. So we're going to consult with him a little bit on the best way to approach all of these issues. The issue on conduits are that we've discovered, I think, that people are using PUD conduit. Now, the difference is there's pole attachments, which are on our poles. Conduits generally are either underground or in building, and they carry our fiber optics and our networks underground. Unless things have changed under federal law, which we're not subject to, there's some belief that the FCC can require access to conduits from competitive providers like CenturyLink. Under our statutes, state of Washington governs its own pole contacts. And I don't believe that rule applies here, but one of the things Jim's going to help us do is get to the ground on that, because, you know, to the extent people are using PUD facilities without applying for that use, it doesn't matter what, if you're an ISP and you want to access our network, if you're some other, you know, utility out there attaching to our facilities and they haven't applied for us, if they're using our conduit and they haven't disclosed that and aren't paying for that, then the PUD needs to start accounting for that. And there's a cost that the PUD incurs, and we have the right and ability to impose that cost on our users. And we ought to, given the direction we're going, we need to start collecting every piece of that, my belief is. So this is sort of a long-winded way of saying that this is sort of the formal start of this process to let everybody out there know that the PUD is going to start evaluating its facilities, who's using it, and we want to make sure everybody has the appropriate insurance in place when they use our facilities, that they have the appropriate applications in place when they use our facilities, that the use of those facilities are done consistent with local, state, and federal codes. And it's an important process, especially as we begin to deploy our own facilities. We want to make sure our use of those facilities is consistent with all those same rules. So I know that's maybe more than you wanted to hear, Kevin, but anyway, that's sort of where we're at.
Perfect, Joel. There's a lot of work to do here with contracts, with a lot of things. Joel's been working on it for a while, but this will consume a lot of time and energy from the PUD to move this project forward.
Yep.
Tammy, do you have your hand up?
Will. So I've been vocal
No.
and pushing for the better part of the last 2 years on the pole attachment fees and the cost of service that we had done on that. And that we were, you know, in my opinion, kind of behind the curve from where everybody else in the industry was. And one of my concerns was, because we were getting into the retail broadband, that we are consistent and fair and applying the same rules to ourselves as we're going to apply to ISPs, whether it's wholesale or maybe another retail ISP or whatever. So this sounds promising that we are getting closer to that being done. So thank you for that work.
Yep, you bet. Thanks, Commissioner.
And with that, unless someone else has something, we're done with manager's report.
Only cap.
Oh, holy cap. Oh, I have my notes here. I didn't read it. Thank you, Dan. So a quick update on Ole Cap. I believe, well, I'll let Will do it. You've sent the contract to Leo this morning?
Yesterday, and he's returned it signed. We should have it connected by Friday.
Okay.
That would be good, because that's what I heard from them. They're really hoping to have all their work done by Friday so they can get their inspections lined up. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I've got to chime in here. Sorry. Leo has to sign the contract. I mean, he's got to be under contract. He's like any other provider. And this is part and parcel of my last soapbox here. So,
He did sign the contract yesterday, Joel. So we're good to go.
perfect. Wonderful to hear. Thanks.
Thank you for your extra review on that. Appreciate it.
So I believe we've reached the end of our agenda. And I will now declare our meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.